The last thing she felt was the seat dropping out from under her. Not a jolt, not a warning, just gone. 1 second she was on a plane, the next second the plane wasn't there anymore. She was 17 years old, still buckled into a row of 3 airplane seats, spinning through open sky above the Amazon rainforest at 10,000 feet. The wind was so loud she couldn't hear herself scream. The clouds were so thick she couldn't see the ground coming. And then the jungle swallowed her whole. And then nothing. Before we go any further, if you're new here, hit subscribe and like right now, because this is exactly the kind of story we tell every single week. Don't miss the next one. Okay, stop. Let's talk about where we are, because the setup to this story is almost as wild as the survival itself. It's December 24th, 1971, Christmas Eve, Lima, Peru. A 17-year-old German girl named Juliane Koepcke is sitting at an airport with her mother, Maria, waiting to board a flight. They're heading to the remote Amazon jungle town of Pucallpa, about an hour away by air, to spend Christmas with Juliane's father, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke. Hans Wilhelm is a respected German biologist who has spent years running a research station deep in the Peruvian rainforest. Now here's something important. Juliane is not your average 17-year-old. She grew up partly in the Amazon. She spent chunks of her childhood at her father's research station, learning the plants, learning the animals, learning how the jungle worked. She wasn't a tourist, she was practically raised by the forest. She just didn't know the forest was about to test everything she'd ever learned. The plane they boarded was a Lockheed Electra turboprop, Lanza Flight 508, 92 people on board. Flight time, about 1 hour. Nothing special, a routine Christmas Eve trip. Except almost immediately after takeoff, the weather turned ugly. The plane was flying into the edge of a severe tropical thunderstorm, the kind that builds fast over the Amazon basin and gets violent without much warning. Passengers could see lightning flashing outside the windows. The turbulence hit hard. Bags fell from overhead bins, drinks spilled, people grabbed onto whatever was closest to them. Then things went from bad to catastrophic in seconds. One of the engines was struck by lightning, the fuel tank ignited, and the structural damage was so severe, so fast, that the plane didn't go into a dive, it didn't spiral down, it just came apart, mid-air, like something invisible grabbed both ends and pulled. At 10,000 feet above the Amazon jungle, Lanza Flight 508 broke into pieces, and Juliane Koepcke, still buckled into her seat, fell out of the sky. 92 people were on that plane. She is the only one who ever walked out of the jungle. But I want you to hold on to something I'm about to say, because this changes the whole story. Surviving the fall was not the hard part. She opened her eyes, and she was lying on the jungle floor. She didn't know how long she'd been out. The light filtering through the canopy above her suggested it was still daytime, but which day, she wasn't sure. Her whole body felt wrong. She did a slow, careful inventory. Her collarbone, broken. She could feel the wrongness of it with every breath. Her right eye, swollen almost completely shut from a deep gash above it. Her arm, cut badly, bleeding through her sleeve. Her vision, blurry because her glasses were gone, and she was severely nearsighted. The jungle around her was a wall of green shapes she could barely distinguish. She had one sandal, the other was gone. She was in the Amazon, barefoot on one side. She called out for her mother. Her voice came back to her, swallowed almost immediately by the density of the jungle. No answer. She got up, slowly, painfully, and started searching the area around her. What she found stopped her cold. Other passengers were there, still buckled into their seats. They had impacted the jungle floor at full speed. They didn't survive. She didn't let herself look for long. She couldn't afford to. Scattered through the trees and the mud around the wreckage were things that made the whole scene feel surreal, almost dreamlike in the worst possible way. Christmas presents, wrapped gifts, some of them torn open by the impact, their contents lying in the mud. Toys, clothes, things meant for someone's family, for Christmas morning, for a holiday that was never going to happen. She found one thing she could actually use, a bag of hard candy. That became her entire food supply. She kept calling for her mother. The jungle answered with sounds she didn't recognize, something large moving through the trees somewhere behind her, the constant layered noise of insects, so loud it almost felt physical. And then she remembered something her father had told her, something he'd said more than once, almost casually, the way you say things when you don't realize how much they'll matter someday. If you're ever lost in the jungle, find water and follow it downstream. Downstream always leads to people. That was her plan. That was the whole plan. But before she could execute it, her arm got worse. The wound was deep, and the Amazon rainforest is one of the most biologically active environments on the planet. Open wounds don't stay clean there, not for long. Within the first couple of days, Juliane noticed something beyond the pain, something that made her stomach turn. Movement inside the wound. She forced herself to look. Maggots, fly larvae, had already burrowed into the cut and were feeding inside it. She could feel them moving, not just see them, feel them, shifting around under the surface of her own skin. She had no tweezers, no antiseptic, nothing even close to medical supplies. She was 17 years old, alone in the Amazon, with insects living inside her arm. And she still had to walk. She found a stream, and she started following it. Barefoot, one sandal, one bare foot, on ground that was a constant obstacle course of roots, rocks, and things that sting, bite, or inject venom into you if you hit them wrong. The jungle floor is not open ground. Every step required thought. Every step cost something. She moved slowly. She had to. The stream widened as she followed it, and that meant the banks opened up a little, which sounds like a relief until you realize what lives on open riverbanks in the Peruvian Amazon. Caimans, black caimans, relatives of the crocodile, and in this part of the world, they grow big, over 13 feet in some cases. They lie on the banks without moving, dark and still as logs, and they watch you. Juliane would round a bend in the river and they'd just be there, 5 feet away, 8 feet away, completely motionless, just watching. She moved around them carefully and kept going. In the water, electric eels. She knew they were there. She waded through anyway, because the alternative was stopping. Stopping was not an option her brain would accept. Bullet ants on the ground, small insects with a sting that's been described by people who've experienced it as feeling like being shot. She stepped on them, she brushed against them, she absorbed it and kept moving. Every night was its own kind of ordeal. The Amazon at night is not dark the way a city is dark. It's a complete, total blackness that presses against you, and it is loud. The insects and frogs and nocturnal animals layer sound on top of sound until it feels like the jungle is breathing directly into your ear. She couldn't always tell how far away something was. She couldn't tell if what she was hearing was 10 feet away or 50 yards. She started talking to herself, not panicking, just talking, narrating, telling herself what the next step was, counting her footsteps, reminding herself of the rule, follow the water, Follow the water, follow the water. It became something close to a prayer. Her arm was deteriorating. The fever started creeping in around day 5 or 6, a dull, persistent heat that sat behind her eyes and made the edges of her thinking go soft. The maggot count was climbing. She eventually counted more than 30 of them living inside the wound. She started losing track of time. The days blurred together. Green light, black night, green light, black night. She wasn't sure anymore if it had been 7 days or 9. She stopped trying to count the days and started only counting the next hour. 1 hour, one stretch of riverbank, one more bend in the stream. That's all she allowed herself to think about. On what she believed was around day 9, she found something that changed everything. Not rescue, not safety, but something that gave her just enough fuel to keep going. A boat, a small motorboat pulled up on the riverbank, empty, and near it, a narrow path cut into the jungle. Where there's a path, there are people. She followed it. At the end of the path was a small wooden shelter, a loggers' camp, used by timber workers moving through the area. It was empty, but it was stocked. She found food. She found something else, a container of fuel. And she remembered something else her father had told her, about wounds, about maggots, about what you do in the field when you have no medicine but you need the wound clean. She poured the gasoline directly into her arm. There are no words that do justice to what that felt like. She has said in interviews that the pain was extraordinary, but it worked. The maggots came out. The wound, while far from healed, was at least no longer actively getting worse. She cleaned herself up as best she could. She ate. She lay down in the shelter. And she waited, because she understood something now, something clear and simple that cut right through the fever and the exhaustion and grief she'd been holding at arm's length for 11 days. People come back to their boats. On the 11th day, she heard voices. 3 local lumbermen, timber workers who used this exact camp as a base while working in the area, arrived to find a teenage girl sitting inside their shelter, pale, barely conscious, her arm wrapped in a crude bandage, eyes that looked like they'd seen something no person should see. They later said their first instinct was fear, not of her, but for her, because she looked like something that shouldn't have been able to be there at all. They gave her food and water immediately. They treated her wound using a traditional local method, packing it with a plant-based remedy to pull out remaining infection and reduce the inflammation. They were calm and careful and kind in a way that, after 11 days of being completely alone, must have felt like something close to impossible. Then they put her in their boat. They traveled by river for hours to reach a town with medical access. From there, she was airlifted to a hospital in Pucallpa, the same city she'd originally been flying to on Christmas Eve. At the time of her rescue, 14 separate search and rescue operations had been actively looking for survivors of Lanza 508. Not one of them had found her. She had covered roughly 35 miles through some of the most hostile jungle terrain on Earth. Broken collarbone, 1 sandal, no glasses, a maggot-infested wound, fever, no real food, 11 days. And she found her own way out. But there's one more piece of this story, and it's the piece that lingers. Investigators searching the crash site later found Juliane's mother, Maria. She had also survived the fall. She was found still buckled into her seat, injured but alive, not far from where the wreckage was concentrated. But her injuries had left her unable to move, unable to walk out, and based on the evidence investigators found at the scene, they concluded that Juliane Koepcke had survived for several days after the crash, before she died. She was waiting for help that never found her in time. Juliane didn't know. She was already following the water downstream. Juliane Koepcke survived. She recovered physically, and she rebuilt her life. She became a biologist, exactly like her parents. She returned to the Amazon, not running from it, but going back to it. She eventually worked at the very research station her father had spent his life building in the jungle. She wrote a memoir. She gave interviews. She went on record about every part of what happened, not sensationalizing it, not dramatizing it, just telling it straight. She has said she doesn't consider herself particularly brave. She has said she was terrified, constantly. She has said there were moments when she wasn't sure her legs were going to keep working. But she had one rule, and she followed it. And here's what I want you to take from this, really take, not just hear. When everything in your life is falling apart, and I mean structurally, fundamentally falling apart, not just a hard week, your brain is going to do something that feels helpful, but is actually the thing that will destroy you. It's going to show you the whole problem at once, every mile you haven't walked, every obstacle between where you are and where you need to be, every single way things could still go wrong. It'll lay it all out in front of you like a map of everything you can't handle. And if you look at that map, if you try to solve all of it at once, it will paralyze you. Juliane didn't look at the map. She picked one rule, one direction, 1 hour at a time, one bend in the river at a time. She let the rest of it go, and she followed the water. She fell 10,000 feet from a disintegrating airplane on Christmas Eve, 1971. She walked out of the Amazon jungle 11 days later. She is alive today. Not because she was built differently than you or me, because when she had absolutely nothing left, no food, no glasses, no mother, no help coming, she had one rule, and she didn't let go of it. If this story hit you the way it hit me the first time I heard it, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that one rule is enough. I'll see you in the next one.